Ah, darn it. That's the wrong transition. Look at that. Oh, gosh. Oh, gosh. Hey there, friends. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it might be where you are out there. Welcome back to the live stream. This is C Sharp with CSharpFritz. It's sunny here in Philadelphia. You can see looking out over the skyline there. Things are fantastic here. It's wonderful. Bright and Sunday morning. Bright and sunny Monday morning. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is C Sharp with CSharpFritz. We're going to be talking about some getting started tips for folks that are beginning C Sharp. You're writing your first bits of code. You're learning how to use the tools, how to use the programming language, and we're gonna get into that today. We're gonna talk about building classes. What's it mean to make your own types so that we can write our own applications and have those interact with each other? Build properties on those classes so that we can define the features, the facets of those objects we want to define. And we'll talk a little bit about fields and constants. And we're even going to touch on a new feature that was just introduced with C# 9 called records. And we'll work with records a little bit today. 6 in the morning. Oh my goodness. There's our friend. Hey, it's Tara Jobst. He's here. Right. It's German. I pronounce it the right way. Let me bring up the chat. It's right over here. You see the chat. It's a little bit smaller. I think we might need to make that a little bit bigger and fix the scaling on that because it's just a little bit too small for this. Let me go over and say hello. My goodness, so many friends here today. Jose Silva is here. So Neil, good to see you. Tim is here. Surly Dev, yes, test messages received. Scrolling down, Avandro is here. Eric Veneker, is that Takir? Hello to you in India. Famous Guid. Famous Guid? Is there a more famous GUID than 0000, the GUID.empty? I mentioned Terra Jobst is here. Fire is here. Nick Chap says, Janesco, good to see you. The user is here. The user? Is there any other user? There's just the user. Good to see you. Yes, it's 6 in the morning. Absolutely. Super C Sharp. Well, yes, got my Super C Sharp hat on today. Love this hat. Chris Jones. Hey, good to see you. Zilalem? Yes, Philadelphia is where I'm broadcasting from. Abu Bakar in Sierra Leone. Good to see you. Rizwan is in Pakistan. Hello, hello. I like the console right line there. See this? Look at this. Trying to get some more code. My goodness. I'm just going to stop at Ender. Ender with a question. Do programmers have to type with 10 fingers? No. In fact, there's a number of folks that program by speaking, by dictating to Visual Studio, and they get it to write code. Plan crash. Where? What window? Plan crash. I think we're okay. Wolfhound Jesse, hello. Claudia Mohammed, hello to you in Egypt. Chill stream in Croatia. It's 98 Fahrenheit out there. Woo! My goodness, that's a little bit warm. Let's see here. G Return in the Philippines. Good to see you. Good morning, Ragvendra. Hello, hello. Carlos in Colombia, Karam in Egypt, Claudia in Romania. Oh my goodness. You love the live sessions? Fantastic. Mukpagbeg. Oh boy, wow. Wait, that looks like that's a Bulgarian name. Murdad is here. Good morning. Alan in Hong Kong. Oh my goodness. Method Man in Serbia. Roman. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the respect there. C Sharp and C++, the old school. Well, right, we focus on C Sharp here. You use 4 fingers. The more fingers you have to type with, the faster you're going to be able to key in things with. Dictation works very nicely as well. Rocking out with some more formatted code there. Suresh from India. Hello, hello. And greetings to us from Sergio in Cuba. Alireza, hello, welcome in. It's great to see so many of you tuning in so early on a Monday morning, right? It's great to grab a cup of coffee. Let's go back and for those of us that have been around the block a little bit, that are a little bit wiser in our age, go back and talk about some of those things, some of those basics to get folks started here. And of course, for those of you that are new, always open to answering questions, please. The AMA tag is turned on here on Twitch. Ask me anything. If there's anything around the topic of learning C# that you want to know more about, please ask your questions. Key them in there in chat, whether it's YouTube, Twitch, Learn TV. We're happy to stop and answer your questions. Folks that are here in the chat rooms, please, we ask you to leave some breathing room for the beginners to ask their questions. And if it's a question that you can help out with, please feel free to chime in to help out. But we want to make sure that this is a very welcoming environment for anybody to ask questions and participate. This isn't so much about Fritz talking here on stream, but it's about having a discussion with you, the viewers out there, so that we can all learn some more here. All right? The more fingers, the more chances of a typo, and there was a typo in that. I'm just going to deny that, but I definitely got what you're saying there. You've got your C# certification issued by Microsoft, but you'd like to refresh your knowledge. Exactly. There's all kinds of things to discuss there. Here's a famous GUID. Okay. Thanks so much. I don't know what that's the GUID for. All right. Oh, I've got my coffee backing up on me here. Fritz teaching, sharing, and of course, the hats. That's right, Aztec Consulting. Always the hats. There's more than 150 in the collection. We're closing in on 200. So that's a thing. Like 2 weeks ago, I did my 600th stream, 600th live stream, and I did nothing to celebrate it. I definitely need to do something about that. So, Sammy in Turkey, hello, welcome in over there on YouTube. Good to see you. Rockin' Out is here. Rockin' Out? All right. I'll take it. Good to see you. Rockin' Out is here. So all of the samples, all of the code you're going to see here today, it's all saved. It's out in a series of interactive Jupyter notebooks that you can get to on our GitHub repository. GitHub.com/ /CSharpFritz/C# with CSharpFritz. Let me post that into chat so everybody gets a copy of that link. So you can click through and you can go into our notebooks where we have all the code. And you can run this in your browser. You can run this in Visual Studio Code. You don't have to install a thing. If you have Visual Studio Code installed already, great. You're going to have a good experience working with this. If you don't have that, if you're watching on a tablet, maybe if you're watching on your phone and you have a tablet handy, you can open up a browser and you can navigate through and start running these samples right there in your browser. Let me get some music playing here in the background, and I'll show you how you can do that. This is the Synthwave playlist of Stream Beats from Harris Heller. Check it out at streambeats.com. Music that's free, royalty-free, DMCA-free, that you can listen to, you can have playing in the background, whether you're on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook gaming, wherever it might be. There's music you can download and listen to locally. Run locally. What a developer I am. You can download and listen to that music locally. Streambeats.com. Thank you so much, Harris, for making this music available for us to listen to today. Let me see how that is. That's not too bad. That's not too bad. All right, I'll take it. That's a decent sound level already there. All right. So let me head over. Let me show you the GitHub repository, and then we'll get into the code here. Let's actually walk into this. So I think it's this button. There we go. Hey, there's my GitHub repository. So if you want to run this locally, you can download, you can clone things locally. And you can go into, we're going to be in the notebooks folder today, and we're on notebook 0102 here is what we're going to be going through and working on. I'm noticing that my chroma key is a little bit messed up, and I'm flipped from this camera as well. No matter, we're going to be over at the big scene in just a minute. So if you want to run this locally in your browser, you don't want to have to install anything. You don't want to have to download any code, open up anything. Just run it in your browser. Click the Launch with Binder button here, and it'll clone and open up a copy on a service called Binder. And you'll be able to go through the same notebook that we're going to be going through using Visual Studio Code on Windows today. But this notebook works on Windows, Mac, Linux. It'll work on a Raspberry Pi. It'll work in the browser, and we're going to learn some things together today. Is that Wendox has a question about constructors. Constructors is a topic we're going to get to today in relation to dependency injection, or is that what it's mainly used for? As far as I understand it, constructor is always called when that class is referenced. Well, you need to construct your class, yes. So if you want XYZ class to always have an instance of something, that's where you would use a constructor. Thanks in advance is the question that we have over here. You're going to go through a constructor one way or another. If you're using dependency injection, you know what? Let me come back to that. Let me hold off on any of that. Let me come back to that when I get to constructors, which will be in it'll be in a little bit. It's part of the notebook here. And you're going to see it in just a minute. It is right there. It's the second topic that we're going to get into. All right. So we'll talk about it more as we get into constructors right there. And I hope what you find is constructors are a very powerful thing that we can use to control how our classes are configured. More about that in a minute. All right. I think I'm looking here. YouTube, you went quiet on me. You all right over there, YouTube? That's not like YouTube. YouTube likes to continue there. So, Jose's asking a question about destructors or a dispose method. Let me come to that after I get over to the other set over here. Good coffee this morning. Good coffee. All right, let me grab my phone because I'm going to need my timer over there. Yes, that's right. Aztec says my constructor discussion will be constructive. See what he did there? That's a thing. Ooh, abstract versus interface. Good question. Depends. Depends on what you're trying to do. Depends on what you're trying to accomplish. We'll get into abstract classes and interfaces. They're a little bit further down here, down in the 8th session. We're going to get into that topic, and we'll even get really into dependency injection in the 9th session. But I will say that .NET folks, because of what the greater flexibility with interfaces, you'll see them using more interfaces in their coding. Abstract classes have an absolute place, and it depends on what your use case is when you would want to use an abstract class, a base class versus interfaces, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Class versus records. We'll talk about that at the end of this session, because we're going to be talking about records as well. You're locked into interfaces for dependency injection and testing. There you go, rocking out. That's exactly a good use case scenario for interfaces. Let me head over to the other scene so we can get up the green screen and we can talk about, and we can start going through and talking about classes. Asynchronous constructors? No. Let me get over to the other scene. Let's start talking about this. I got to change mics here so I can get on the remote mic. There we go. There we go. Oh, you listen to me to improve technical English. Thank you, Roman, on YouTube. That's very kind of you. I hope I take my time and I pause enough that you're able to keep up with the English. I try not to go too fast going through this. Entity framework versus Hibernate is a question over there on YouTube. We encourage folks to use Entity Framework Core with .NET Core. And are they still maintaining in Hibernate? I haven't followed up on it in a while. I prefer Entity Framework Core. Async constructors are not a thing. Arctum is asking about records and tuples. They seem more natural than classes for those that use more functional programming. Sure. I think that's legit. The .NET 6 preview documentation is published. It's coming. It's being built. It sometimes takes time, but it's being built and maintained. It's a preview. Features that are available should be in the documentation. If they're missing, drop me a line. Let's see if we can get that in there. Deployment will be... Well, deployment isn't included in this series, but we will definitely get into deployment on stream at some point. So... yeah, of course, 6 much faster than in Hibernate, almost as fast as Dapper. Yes. Let me get over to the other scene now that I'm all set up here, and we can start talking through some of this. Oh, there we go. Did I get that right? Get over to that other scene. Get over there! That laptop is... Hello? I'm over here now. Standing up, look at that. I got my Surface book. I've got my Visual Studio Code behind me. What more could you ask for? You know what I'm saying here? Is Terry up still here? Look at this. This is how you do a stream. We're writing code. We're standing in the code. I'm in Visual Studio. It doesn't get any cooler than that. Am I right? Taking a look over at chat again. Let me see here. You couldn't find web application create builder documentation. Well, create builder has been around for a while. So, I'm on brand. Well, is it because I remembered to wear my Microsoft shirt today? So, how you doing there, Eggsy? I mean, I'm in Visual Studio. This doesn't just happen anywhere. If I'm on the Visual Studio channel, if I'm on the .NET channel on YouTube, I want to be one with the code. It's a very zen thing. I don't know. Do I use Linux? Yes, I do. Matco001 over on Twitch. I do use Linux. I use Linux a lot. I have a laptop that runs Kubuntu Linux called, it's from a company called Kforce. Amazing laptop. Love using that machine. Yeah, I use that a lot, actually. It's for application builder. No, it's slightly different. Slightly different. So, Yeah, drop me a line. Drop me a line on Twitter, and we can take a look further at that, so I can make sure that we've got some updates for you there, because that's something that should be coming along. You like my caps? Where can you get them? Asks Sergio. I had made. This one is a Jeff Fritz original. There's a .NET swag repository on the GitHub, the hub of all things Git. Thank you. GitHub.com/ I believe it's .NET/swag. And you can find the logos there. This one is from the Save the Day collection. And... oh, wrong one. Give me that one. So, come on. I don't see it. It's here. Oh, there it is. The black is very dark. Give me the SVG. That one should load a little bit faster. These are giant images here. There it is. So, I had a friend take this and stitch it on a hat for me. So, worked out great. And I also have the Blazer hat. I grabbed the Blazer logo from there, and because those .NET swag logos, they're free and open source. You're just not allowed to sell them. I had a few of those put together for me on hats. But like my GitHub hat, that the GitHub makes. The Azure hat, I made that a couple years ago. I shouldn't have made it, but I made it anyway. So. You're new to .NET. If you have multiple projects that are referenced in Web API project, and I have test projects at, well, Method Man fan. How do I build for production? I am on Linux. Check out .NET Publish. Go into your Web API project, and at the command line, execute .NET Publish, and it should build a release build, and put it together so that it's ready to be pushed into production. If it doesn't by default create a release build, I can't remember. Look at the -C switch. C as in Charlie. Switch for the publish, .NET Publish command. Is there a .NET plugin for Linux? Oh, more than a plugin. Bags McGee. There's all the APIs are available for you. Go to get. It sounds stupid to say it. Go to get.net. Get.dot.net, right? See it right there. And there is a complete SDK that you can download to run on your favorite Linux flavor right here. So go get .NET 5. You can get .NET Core as well. And you can see, I'll go to .NET 5. There's package manager instructions if you need it, and there's downloads for all your favorite processor models. Of course, Mac OS, Windows, and .NET install scripts if you want to clone and install using something like curl. So, Ubuntu is pretty good for beginners. Yes, I do have a hat collection site. Yeah, Janescu, if you want to share that link, go for it. Can I have examples why Visual Studio Code is better than other products like JetBrains? No, I cannot. I'm not going to go into comparing. We don't compare technologies. We don't compare products on these channels. Try them out. We think Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio 2019, Visual Studio 2022 coming up are pretty great. We're not going to compare and get into debates of the merits of different products. You're on a Visual Studio channel. We're going to use Visual Studio. Yeah, the whole dot thing does backfire a little bit for URLs. All right. Let's no, async constructors. Async constructors was something that was tinkered with, but I don't think that's a thing in C#. I'm nearly positive it's not a thing in C#. However, you can asynchronously start a program. You can have a main method inside of a console application, or a WPF app or a Windows Forms app that is async. Visual Studio Code is always coming out. Visual Studio 2022, new version of full Visual Studio 2022 is coming out. Can you debug .NET on ARM processors? Yes. All right. We're going to talk about making our own types with classes and scope. So, when you're in C# and you're using this object-oriented language, you of course have the need to build your own types. If you're going to work with something, if you're going to have some sort of a concept in your code, you need to have an object that you're going to work with. Well, that object is defined by several different keywords you can use, but the primary one that folks use is called a class. Okay? So, class is an object that you can use inside your code to define whatever object it is you want to describe. So, first, a word on memory utilization and garbage collection. For those of you that are a little bit more advanced, why is that scrolling too far? There we go. Memory with C# and .NET is dynamically allocated and reclaimed by the .NET runtime, so as you stop referencing variables. The .NET garbage collector runs occasionally, freeing memory that was previously used by variables. There are ways to tune the garbage collector and in-depth studies of how it manages memory that are much more advanced than this part of the series, and if you'd like to read more, there's official documentation about the .NET garbage collector. Since .NET is completely open source, C# is completely open source, the compilers are open source, you can actually go and check out the complete source code of the .NET garbage collector. They've done amazing things to make it run faster with some help from the community. I encourage you to check that out. So the garbage collector means that you no longer have to clean up after yourself. You don't have to destroy things when you no longer need them. I'm just no longer using it anymore. Toss it to the side, and the garbage collector comes through like the house maid or something and cleans up after you and takes care of all of that. So, that's fine. That's easy for us to understand. Now, we're going to work with types using the class keyword, and this is going to create reference types. So, there are two different ways that our data is allocated to us, our memory is allocated to us in .NET. There's two different locations. There's a place called the stack and a place called the heap. Don't worry too much about the specifics of these and where they live and how they're managed. The garbage collector is going to take care of that for you. As beginners, don't worry about it. For performance reasons, there's reasons why you want things on the heap, and there's reasons you want things on the stack. If things are on the stack, they're going to get freed up from memory very, very quickly, and we don't have to wait for the garbage collector to come through as much. If they're on the heap, they'll fragment memory, and the interactions there are a little bit messier, and the garbage collector will actually stop processing while it clears some of that up. Stopping processing is minimal impact to you. Minimal. You won't even see it most of the time. But it does run in the background. The garbage collector does do these things. Don't worry about it if you're a beginner and you're working on this. When you get into some high pressure situations, high performance situations, then you're going to want to tune and get into why things are allocated to both. Don't worry about it for now. Classes are a reference type. The other is value types, like we saw with characters, integers, doubles, booleans, okay? Those are value types. Those value types go on the stack. Reference types, like a class, go on the heap. That's all I'm going to talk about those two. We're using reference types now, no longer value types. So a reference type lets us go in and create larger, more complex objects that use memory a little bit differently. How differently it uses it from the other value types, don't worry about it. It's a little bit more advanced. Now, you define a class by indicating their name, some block of content, and one or more access modifiers. The syntax is followed by curly braces that includes the contents of the class definition. So if we define our first class as a student right here, student and some curly braces. Easy. Now we have a student class. And I execute that code and it's happy. It's done its thing. It's there. We have a student class. It's not very exciting yet, but we have what is a student. I'm going to pause for a second and take a look at chat and get caught up. Good afternoon to you, Nitro Evil. How's it going over there in underscore land? Haha. See, I brought that back. Guacamole is here. Hello. Eggsy. Am I writing classy code today? Yes, indeed, we are. Suresh with a question about WCF. That is off topic. The answer is no. There's plenty of documentation about that you can find over on the .NET blog, and that's all I'm going to go into that. Any plan to improve OmniSharp? Yes. There is a team working on OmniSharp. It's a community-based team working on OmniSharp. When I try to run .NET version, it says could not execute because the application was not found or a compatible .NET SDK is not installed. Reinstall .NET SDK. Why does C# not allow user type value in language definition, like temperature double? Because that's not the type of language that C# is. That's not how the language works. The C# designers decided to go a different way, instead of being able to alias types. Is Blazor framework provide enough flexibility to develop features as other frameworks do? That is very... I need a little bit more context to leap on your question there. It's possible to make value types without initializing. Take a look at structs. Structs will get you a little bit closer on that, as well as value tuples. Value tuples will get you closer there as well. So I've got a class called student. It's not very interesting, and I can by default classes are internal. Yes. So this class is internal. It can be seen by other classes in the same library or program, and you can explicitly set that scope, we call it, by defining it in front here, and that works. We can also make our classes public so that they can be seen outside of our library or program if they're referenced in other places. That's a topic for... referencing outside of our library is a topic for a little bit further down. We're still talking about the basics here. So you have different ways that you can set class here. It is possible also to make a private class, but that's a little bit of an isolated scenario when you would make a private class, because you can actually not only... We're going to start talking about nesting members inside of our class here. So inside of our class, we can define these types of members that we can interact with, that the class is allowed to house and manage for us. So we had a question just a little bit ago about constructors, a method used to define how you create an instance of the class. You're not required to create a constructor, but you can and use it to initialize the behavior of the class. And that's a interesting concept, a unique concept that folks in other languages like JavaScript aren't familiar with. So you can set up a constructor. You can set up a finalizer method that is called when the class is cleaned up by the garbage collector. And since the garbage collector runs at periodic intervals, you don't always know when that finalizer method is called. So we actually don't recommend folks use finalizers unless they really, really need it. So there's an entire pattern there called the dispose pattern that we recommend folks use instead, so that resources that you're using that are outside of your program, resources we call unmanaged resources, those can be directly and explicitly cleaned up. Things like network connections, connections to a database, connections out to a web service, a microservice. These things that you're working with, a handle to a folder or a file on disk, right? That's outside of your program. That's managed somewhere else. You want to explicitly release them when you're done with that. And we recommend folks use a pattern called the dispose pattern instead of a finalizer to clean up those disconnects from those various external services and interactions. I'm going to finish talking about members here and I'll come back to the chat. We can define fields, variables owned by the class, constants, variables defined at compile time that never change for the life of the program. Properties, these are, we're going to get into here a bit, flexible mechanisms that allow for interaction with values stored in the class. Methods. Methods are action-taking code blocks that contain one or more statements, accept parameters, and possibly return values. You might hear them sometimes referred to as functions. Events. An event is an interaction point that allows for notification of other classes, other areas of code, when something of interest occurs inside of our class. We can also include delegates that replace methods based on matching parameters and return types. They're almost like pointers. And operators. We can define how the class interacts with the various built-in .NET and C# operators. So, lots of things we can do with classes and define. So, let's start off talking about constructors and adding some properties. Well, this says add some properties in a constructor to our student class. So, we'll start off with a publicly accessible constructor. Here we go. Now, publicly, look at this. My filter isn't quite working here. Let me go tune that real quick and come back to that next question here. Where to go? It is... One second. This one. There we go. That should do. Yeah, that's right. There we go. All right. Right? There we go. Now we don't see the curtain behind me as bad. Okay. So, we're going to start adding some constructors to this. Public constructors created by default by the compiler and does not explicitly need to be added if no action methods take place during construction. Okay. So we have a constructor defined by specifying some scope, public, internal, private, protected. We'll talk more about scope in a minute, but typically public is what you'll see. The name of the class. So this is a student class up here. I scrolled it right back off. Darn it. There it is. This is a student class up here. So our constructor has the same name, student. Parentheses. Inside those parentheses is where we would declare any variables, any input parameters we want to pass into this constructor that we may work on inside the class to help with initialization. We're not initializing our student class here with anything, so our constructor doesn't need any input parameters, and we're not doing anything here just yet. Let me go back to chat and go back to your questions for a second and catch up. Where did my mouse go? There it is. Fantastic. Scrolling down. Do I think that in a far future, F# will be more relevant than C#? I can't see that far ahead. Sorry. Constructor seems similar to init function in Python. It is a bit like that. The notebooks are public. Yes. I shared the link to the notebooks a little bit earlier. You can go out to GitHub and go to CSharpFritz, C# with CSharpFritz. There it is. And the notebook is right here in the notebooks folder. Click into there, and this is notebook number 2 that we're working on right there about classes. If you download and run it locally, you'll get that notebook. Otherwise, you can launch it from Binder and follow us from there. Okay. Continuing here. Are we talking about design patterns? Not today, no, but we will talk about design patterns. So, continuing scrolling here. Is it possible to create a copy of a reference type object without the copy being referenced by the source object? Asks K. Stosky. Yes, that what you're doing there is cloning. And you can take a look at the clone method that a number of objects have that you can use to create that copy. Is it a coincidence that my VS Code footer looks strikingly similar to Windows XP? Like that with the connector. That's the way it looks. That's the default color that it comes with. So, you're asking to add letters to the alphabet, but if I want to do a different for each, similar, but I can assign values. Is that possible? New syntax. You want to create new syntax for... I'm still not following what you're trying to accomplish. Let's... There's... Can you give me some sample code, some context of what you're trying to do? I'm not following. I'm sorry. Let me take a look here. A couple more. When would I recommend to use records, structs, or classes? What cases? I'll get to that at the end. It's literally the last topic is records, and I'll talk about structs at that point also because you've requested. So thank you, Top Swag Code. So I've defined a constructor here. Now we can define some properties. Let me zoom out just a smidge there. Ah, that's better. So we can define some properties, and these are publicly accessible because they have the public keyword in front of them that define the first name, last name, age, and the is enrolled property for our student. It's important that we know, is our student enrolled in class at our university, at our school, right, in our whatever it might be. So we define properties, and these are called auto-implemented properties because we have get and set keywords here defined like this that provide an automatic backing field that this first name, last name, age, and is enrolled, that these values will be stored in. In this way, I don't need to go and define the actual memory storage behind the scenes in our class. These are just defined as properties that are all publicly accessible with a data type of string or int or bool here for these different properties we're going to set up on our student. So, scrolling down, we'll create a new student and assign it to the variable name S. Okay, so here we're going to say var S equals new student. So just like we saw the var keyword used previously, when we define variables, we can also use that with classes and our classes. So var S equals a new student, and we're going to specify first name equals Mary, last name equals Contrary, age, and is enrolled. So we set those properties by taking our S variable dot property name equals is our assignment operator and whatever value we want to assign. Cool. That's pretty easy to follow. That tracks with other programming languages, and I can then display and show that information. So I'll create another student here, and we'll create Jeff. And when I run this code, I'm going to change this. Somebody left their name in here. There you go. And now I have two students. And this is the format that the notebooks use to display the contents of a class. When I call the display method, it uses this format to show me all the properties of the class in this nice table format for me. That's not bad. I appreciate getting that type of output. If I didn't use the display and I used console.writeLine like I would use if I was writing a console application, I would just get the name of the type. And inside notebooks, each one of our blocks is a submission with some number after it. So I get this weird submission number plus student. It's just saying, well, it's this type. I don't know how you want me to format it. The class by itself doesn't have anything built into it to define how to format things when I write it out, when I cast it into a string. Let's remember that. We're going to come back to that later. So let me change that back to display because it makes it very clear who my students are here. Going back to chat, let's see if I can catch up with some of this. You're going to make new loop logic. Why? For custom. Why? Make age an unsigned byte. Sure, we could do that. Sure, I could make age an unsigned byte. Actually, ubyte, right? You're thinking more of a byte. That still works. But an unsigned byte, right? There are certain keywords you cannot use in function names. That's right, you can't. You can't use for and if. Those are language keywords. You cannot create methods with those names. The works inside. I don't understand why you're trying to write a new for method, a new for construct. A class without no string method displays the reference of the object of that class. That's right. Yep. So there's more. Oh, look at that typo. Oh my goodness. There's more information. Thank you. So that's the basics of defining properties. Okay. Let's get into that constructor a little bit more. So the constructor is an active block of code. Let me zoom in there. That is defined with an access modifier and optionally parameters to help with the initialization of our class. In the above one, the constructor didn't do anything. Not possible. Doesn't actually do anything. But we can do some things in it, right? Even if we don't take input parameters, we can go and initialize some values. So let's start doing something interesting in our constructor for our student. So let's take a look here. If we're creating a new student, well, for our data system that's managing enrollment for our school, for our university, right? If we're creating a student, I'm not creating a student who isn't enrolled. They're a student here at my school, so let's by default set the isEnrolled property to true. I'm not going to just start creating students for Joe Bag of Donuts on the street who's hanging out and dancing on the street corner if they're not actually going to my school. I don't care about storing data for Joe Bag of Donuts. I only care about the folks that are at my school. So if you're at my school, I'm going to start off by setting isEnrolled equals true. I'll flip it to false when you graduate or withdraw or one of those things where I need to track that you're no longer a student. At one point you were. You aren't any longer. Maybe you'll come back a few months later after you go and explore or come back from withdrawing or being expelled from school for disciplinary reasons, whatever it might be. And we can turn that back to true again. There's all kinds of reasons why you'd want to be able to set that back and forth, but I can initialize that value using something like this. Okay, that makes sense. So I still have my same properties here. I'll change that to a byte as recommended. And I can now see that there are things happening and growing with my students. I didn't have to set the is enrolled property. It defaults to true here for, wait a sec, Joe Bag of Donuts. I thought he was hanging out on the street corner over here. Never mind. Okay, let me go back, check out chat, and catch up here. The display, how? That's a function of the .NET notebooks that we're using here. That's that display property that you see here. Display method is a method of the notebook to format. In this case, it formats as a table. There's other types that when you call display, it'll format in different ways, depending on how you have your .NET notebook configured. And that's a topic for the .NET notebooks team and how that works. So, let me see, scrolling down here. Is this a continuous C# course? Yes. Why not create a real-world app with database and more Zulu? That's exactly what I do over on my channel, CSharpFritz, on Twitch and on YouTube. And I need to get some more videos uploaded to YouTube. So, how do we read input from a file? Asks Maha. That's a topic that's a little bit deeper. Check out system.io.file is the object that you're looking for. You want to read input from a file? Take a look at file.openread, I believe is what you're looking for. And that'll get you in that direction. String is actually an array of characters. We talked about that last time. How to take input from a file using StreamReader. The StreamReader, new StreamReader, and you point to the file on disk. So, you'll need to use the build in C# read from file method. Okay, answering that question for somebody else. This is an Apple Watch. Apple Watch 6. So, if the class has 30 students, do we need to use 30 different variables that initiates the student class? Well, you're going to... If you're creating a... I don't want to call it a class. If you're... Right? It is a class. Boy, we're creating a class called class. Right? You're creating a... What else do you call it? Right? An instructor session for that collection of students. You would create one collection of students that you would add those to, and as those students are added to it, they would all be initialized. Yes. All kinds of ways to read from a file. Absolutely. You're new to programming. Where can you start to program a website with C#? Asks Gyro. Check out all the videos in this series on YouTube. Go to the youtube.com.net channel. Click on videos. Playlists. Check out C# with CSharpFritz. I've got 50 plus videos here that walk through in sessions like this where we talk about how to build, and there's even website series, a website series in there. Which kind of resources should we free in destructors or dispose methods? External references to files, to things on disk, to network resources, things that are outside of your application. You're referencing working directly with the GPU. You're working with hardware directly. Release those references and do that in the dispose method, and that'll help you out. Async constructors is a bad idea. Call it a classroom? Nah, not necessarily. So. All right. Do I have any reference? The entire block of source code for this is all out here. Everything that we're doing, all of the sessions, all of the content, all of the samples is all here. Otherwise, on the .NET area, click Learn, and there's all kinds of documentation and stuff there to get you pointed in the right direction. All right, moving on. So we learned a little bit about initializing our class from a constructor. But that was, right, we didn't pass anything in. We didn't actually do anything with it. So we can start to add parameters to our constructors, and then we can overload them and provide multiple constructors. And you'll see this pattern elsewhere in .NET, and you see it in Java as well, where you can provide methods, constructors, with multiple signatures. That is, you can provide different collections of input parameters here that are triggered depending on how you call and interact with the class. So we're going to define a constructor here that has this signature that takes in 3 input parameters, and we separate our input parameters with commas. There's a string for the first name, string for the last name, and the age that we're going to initialize with, and I'll change that to a byte as well. There we go. So in my constructor then, I'm setting the first name property, the last name property, and the age, and I'm defining that they're enrolled by default. This kind of makes sense because there aren't situations when you're managing student information where you have students that don't have names. That's a problem. Every student should have a name. Otherwise, they're going to be raising their hand in class and you're going to be saying, "Hey, you." Everybody has a name. So I'm using first name, last name here. You may use given name, surname for those 2 properties. I'm sticking with a little bit of American English here, and we call them first name, last name. Should class level variables always be private? No. Depends. Didn't know I stream here too. I stream wherever I feel like it. So, all right. So there's my properties. Let me change that back to a byte again. And now I can say, let's create a new student object and assign it to the variable name S. So we're going to create a new student, Jeff Fritz, and he's age 30? 30? 30's good. 30's good. And when we call display, I get my output there. There's Jeff Fritz, age 30, and is enrolled true. Fantastic. Okay. So now I've created a student object with 1 line of code and all the properties are set. That's nice. I can work with that. So and like this says right down here. Let me scroll that up. Every student, we've improved the above code to ensure that every student has a name and an age. Awesome. So we can also chain together constructors. Let's think about that for a second. You may have some constructors that initialize some things, and some constructors that take in values and configure other things. And it may make sense, in order to remove duplication in code, when this constructor is done, hand things off to that one that is doing different types of processing, so that we always have that constructor execute these types of interactions. So, let me give you a real example. What if we define our student as having 2 constructors? What if our student has this parameterless constructor that says a student is enrolled by default? And I'm going to display some text here running the parameterless constructor. You wouldn't normally have that in your class. I put it here so we can see the order that these execute. And I set is enrolled true. We've already seen that. Now I set up another student constructor. This one takes in just the age. And check out this syntax right here. Right, colon this. Colon this. What this does is it says this constructor is also going to execute this constructor. In this way, we'll set the age. I'm going to display some text running the age constructor, and it'll run this constructor as well. I have the other properties set in here as well. I'll change these to bytes. And now I have a method here. I could say new student, age 30, display that student. And when I execute it, check out what happens. Runs the parameter list constructor, runs the age constructor, and there's our student. And look at this. Last name, null. First name, null. You've heard of little Bobby tables? Well, this is little null. I don't even... What gender is that? How do you address them? How's it going there, Nully Null? Good to see you, Nully. Have a good weekend, Nully? Nully, null? I don't know who that is. Null. Whatever. While I'm making fun of null names here, what I want you to notice, what's important to learn here, is that the parameter list constructor was called first. We chained these together. Even though I said create a new student age here, and I passed in 30, it didn't execute this until after it executed this one, okay? Think about it like this. I'm saying new student and I passed in an age. The first thing it does before anything in these curly braces is it executes this, which means it came up here. This doesn't have another chain to go execute something else, so it comes down into the curly braces, ran the display, set is enrolled, finished. So this finished. So now it goes into the curly braces and sets these values. And that's why it says parameter list constructor, the age constructor, and then we're displaying the value because that's the last thing that happened here on line 30. Hope that makes sense. And you remember that lesson from our good friend, our favorite student, Nully Nullison. Nully. Looking good there, Null. I don't know. Scrolling down here, let me catch up with chat. Not covering statics yet. Nope. Is byte signed or unsigned? I thought byte was unsigned. I'm so young. That's right. Don't you forget it. I am a very young man there, Nitro Evil. Absolutely. Pass by reference. C# will pass these classes by reference. You can override and instruct it to pass by value. We're not going to cover that because that's a little bit further out there. What are the benefits of constructor chaining? I answered that. Yes, you can perform arithmetic on bytes. Sir Johnston, that was a very confusing way that you described. It's passed by reference. This is a C# learning series. Yes. Check out the title on Twitch, over on YouTube. Beginning C# with CSharpFritz. Creating class. Yeah. Null is better than nothing. Null is nothing. It's the same thing. Okay. I once remember I had a very long argument with a classmate in I can't remember. It was in either high school or middle school, where they were trying to tell me that 0 and nothing were the same thing. And that's an interesting computer science problem. Nothing means not even a value is set. 0 means there is a value set, and it's indicating the count is 0. There is a value set. It happens to be the empty set, but there is a value set. If there is no value set, it's null. Difference. CSharpFritz doing C#. Who knew? Right? So, if you call an instance of a class within a method, if the instance is not set into a field inside the method, it would be cleaned up at the end of that method. If the instance is not set to a field outside, is he still my friend? No. No. They went off and did something else. They went to a different university and whatnot. All right. So now we can see our properties are being initialized, second constructor being called, blah, blah, blah. All right. So we talked about, and I showed auto-implemented properties, and there's a link through to the .NET documentation there if you want to learn more about auto-implemented properties. And there's access modifiers, a bunch of different access modifiers, including private, internal, protected, and protected internal scope that you can use. So protected and protected internal are when you inherit from another class. Only those other classes that inherit from this class are allowed to interact with it besides the current class. More about that when we get into inheritance and more object design topics a little bit later on in the series. What if we want to do more with their properties when we set and retrieve their values? So let's take a look at making age only capable of being set internally in our student class. Let's update that set modifier. So now we have our constructor here for age. If we only want to allow you to set the age at the time that we created our student, we can add a private modifier to the set keyword here so that this can't be set outside of our student. So check this out. var s equals new student 30. There we go. There's Nully Nullerson. Age 30. Okay. If we try to change Nully's age, right? Look at that. It's not even letting me through there. I've got a red underline here. I mouse over that. The property or indexer student.age cannot be used in this context because the set indexer is inaccessible. It's private. You're not allowed to change this. You're not allowed to interact with this. Our editor is telling us that ahead of time. This is why we like to use full-fledged code editors like Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio 2019, or Visual Studio for Mac. You get features like this. Consequently, and you see display, well, I don't know why it's not showing that. If I try and run this there, I get my compiler error. Sorry! And it's telling me the property, the exact same thing that the type ahead, that the red underline over here, it's the exact same error. It's just I was dumb enough to say, go ahead and run that anyway. Yeah, I know the editor is warning me about this. Go ahead and run it anyway. Well, dummy. Error. Compiler error. Doesn't work. Okay? So, and I'm stretching here a little bit about that compiler error because I didn't listen to the warning Visual Studio Code is giving me. Listen to your code editors when they offer you helpful things like this. There's a reason they're telling you that. You don't want to wait till you get to the end and you get a compiler error here. Let's get past that. Avoid the compiler errors. Compiler errors happen, but when our editor tells us, hey, you can't do this, let's listen to it. There it is working. Let me come back over to chat before I continue into the next segment here. We are using constructor. Why don't we're going to get to record in just a little bit. In fact, it's see. Oh, it's just off. The scroll bar is right here. When we get down to the bottom, we're going to get to record. We will absolutely get to record, and we'll talk about that. But Turan, we'll get to that. You should see me doing PHP. No, you don't want to see me doing PHP. There's a pattern called null object. Don't want to get into that. I don't want to confuse new folks. Do not want to get into that. There's reasons that there's exceptions to how some of these things happen. Don't want to get into that. You started learning C# and Notepad in 2004, right? Yeah, same. And compiling at the command line. Ugh, that was a pain in the neck. And now we have the .NET command line tools. Works great. Is there a reason to use Visual Studio over Visual Studio Code? Yes, there's a lot more tools that you'll get in there that are really, really good, including designers, performance tools, test runners, that'll really make your day and make you a lot more productive. Records are what you wanted for structs? Okay. No, and we're not going to talk about nullable objects. So it's a little bit further out there. Bald-bearded Builder is here. How you doing, my friend? They're a streamer over there on Twitch on the Live Coders team, just like me. All kinds of great stuff that he's streaming about, not just on C# and .NET development, but doing some TypeScript work. I've seen him doing some Node work, even a little bit of, did I see Python at one point? Check out Bald-bearded Builder over there on Twitch. Can I put in a feature request for Visual Studio? Sure, what would you like? He asks, if I try to pass an incorrectly typed parameter to a method, can it say, sorry, you're not my type? You got me. Thank you, sir. You got me. That is what I thought the only things you really need to worry about calling in to anything. Notepad Programmer says it's banana. Not only Notepad programmers, there's a lot of folks, there's a lot of .NET developers that are writing .NET code using Vim. Not so much on Emacs. I don't know. The Emacs folks just haven't picked up on it yet. But a lot of folks in Vim coding with .NET. It's true. They like the Vim. They like their visuals, their C# interactions. Let me see here. I agree. Visual Studio Code is cool. Surround. No, display function is a method inside the .NET notebook. This is a .NET notebook feature. So, yeah, here, I thought it was a real request. No, it's just Bald-bearded Builder trolling me, of course. I can't read chat from my friends here anymore if he's going to be doing that. Vim plugins have come very far for .NET. You are correct. The Vim people are indeed keyboard wizards. True. What's this? VS Code is what? No matter. All right, moving on. So, what if we changed around our property interaction here? What if instead of passing in an age, we passed in a birth date, right? Perhaps we know the birth date of all students. Every student that we admit is going to be born on June 1st, 2000. We know this because, of course, all of our students are born on June 1st, 2000. Little known fact, did you know that horses are documented as born on January 1st of whatever year they were born? Doesn't matter what day during the year, January 1st. When I started getting my paperwork and seeing the birthday, I'm like, wow, all my horses have the same birthday. And it's the beginning of the year. How'd that happen? No, they just set them all to the first of the year. Like, that doesn't make sense. Okay. So what if they all, of course, have the same birthday? Well, we can change our set and get operations and turn around our age property so that it always returns the age by subtracting from that birth date. So we're going to change our constructor here, is enrolled equals true. And notice, just like we saw in the previous stream, the previous video, space does not matter. How you use spaces, how you format your code doesn't matter. How you use white space with C#. I can put my constructor all on one line here with my curly braces around just that one method that I'm executing like some sort of a monster. Some folks see this and they cringe. But that's okay. You can do this. If this makes you happy to code this way, the C# compiler is happy to compile it for you. It is. Remember, we format our code for other humans to read. And if you format your code so it's very unreadable, so it's very difficult for people to read, the compiler doesn't care. The other humans that have to read it after you better hope they don't have a machete. Moving on, I see some more comments coming in here on Twitch, on chat. You write your programs as one line only, says it's bananas. See the trolling here. Dear Lord, come on now. You've seen C# indented as Java using the curly braces in a different way. Okay. Is Visual Studio Code an IDE or a text editor? It's a code editor. Yes, it's not an IDE. Okay. So I can set up my age. Instead of it allowing you to set a value for the age, I'm going to return math.floor, datetime now, subtract. Look at this. And I'll scroll over here. New date time, right? June 1st, total days divided by 365. And I'm going to take the math.floor of that. So round down whatever value you get out of that. So if you get 30.1, it's 30, right? Because you're not 31 until you get to 31. We don't say, hey, he's almost 31, so they're 31. No, there is no rounding up. We round down ages. So that's what math.floor does. It truncates off everything to the right of the decimal place. So now, if I say, give me a new student, now I get, there they are, there's Nully Nullerson, 21 years old. Because they were born, like all students at our university, on June 1st. June 1st. I should learn to move over here. June 1st. And scroll down. Nully Nullerson, 21 years old. Okay. Sure. And if I try to set the age, even though there's no there's no set specified here, right? If I do that, there comes the red underline. Fritz, you can't do this. Cannot be assigned to, it is read-only. There is no set. You don't have to carry a set keyword for your properties. Maybe they're not allowed to be set from outside of your class. They're read-only. You can do that, and that's the error that you'll get back from the compiler. All right. We can also define default values and initialize auto-implemented properties. So check this out. I've been doing that is enrolled and setting it in the constructor. There's an easier way to do that without a constructor, and that's by initializing our properties with a value. So what I can do is right here. So I've got public bool is enrolled get set. So there's my auto-implemented property. And I can just say equals true. So at the time that this class is instantiated, so when I say new student right here, it's going to create this. There is no constructor, so it's going to give me just the default values for these things. Without anything defined next to these, they're going to get the default values of string, which are null, the default value of that integer, which is 0, and the default value of is enrolled. Now, Boolean's default value is false, but because we put this initializer here, equals true, at the time of construction, it will allocate the is enrolled property and then set it to true. That's right, I and then. Do I have any and then emotes in chat? Let me see. Any and thens here? Catching up here. Tail learn code with some very good advice. Always write your code like a homicidal maniac will be working with your code next. It's true. I've worked with homicidal maniacs. Anyways. Expression-bodied members. Yes, not getting there yet. A little bit too advanced. Let's get the basics. Basics. And we can totally talk about that after we get folks past the basics. You were amazed when you saw Visual Studio Code is made with Electron? Oh, yeah. And it's been out for more than 5 years now, at least. They're all sweet summer children. That's right, Adam. I like that. Yes, we talked about constructors already. And then, there's the and thens. Thank you. Over in Twitch chat. Homicidal Maniacs? No, did not. And I'm not going to read that one. Can I default the first and last name to John Doe the same way it asks Johnny B. Cat? Absolutely, right? Sure. Well, by default, this is John Doe. Save that, rerun it, and there we go. By default, just saying new student, first name, last name, John Doe, age defaults to 0 because integer was 0 by default, and true. Okay? Integer is a value type. It can't be null, and so it becomes 0 because no value has been set. So it's 0 is the default value, but we initialize to true. We initialize to John and Doe, so we get that initialized name there. Remove those, and we're back to our buddy Nully Nullerson. So, will this be a series? Oh yes, Cyrus. Absolutely it is. Continuing, ongoing series every Monday morning. Scrolling. Why don't I use unit? What? Redux pattern and testing components. No. I've talked about unit testing, but not testing components or Redux. Iman asking, what's an IPYNB file? So up here, say this is classes IPYNB. This is an interactive Python notebook. A Jupyter notebook is the technology, the framework they use to define those. And you can use a .NET kernel to run .NET code inside of that Jupyter notebook. So I've got Markdown mixed with code, like you see here, that's being output and formatted inside Visual Studio Code, inside of a web page if you're using Binder, or other tools if you're using them on disk. Really great stuff to allow you to build and test out some code and wrap it with prose so you can create either a teaching experience like this or maybe a report, an interactive report. Maybe you create some scripts that'll help investigate outages or work with some data. If you need to do some data scrubbing, you can have a little notebook that'll format and do some of those repetitive tasks for you and give you some nice output along the way. Unit data type. Do you mean uint data type? Yeah, let's go back and change the age to a byte again. I'll do that. That's the next one, and I know why that failed. So that worked. So here, there, expression body definitions. We'll get to that one in just a second. So if I make this a byte, this needs to be a byte as well. And now that works. So we can do next one. Expression body definition for properties. So this is what we were hinting at there in chat just a second ago. You can see the fat arrow operator, right? It's sometimes referred to as the fat arrow operator. C# folks read this operator as such that. My colleague Scott Hanselman, you'll hear him refer to this as the Anders operator. It didn't have a name, so he just named it after the inventor of C#, Anders Heilsberg. So with the folks in the JavaScript community and some other communities call this the fat arrow operator. I'm okay with that. We can call it fat arrow, but when we read our code, we read it as such that. Okay? So we can provide an expression that defines and returns a value all in one command using this fat arrow operator with our properties. So take a look. We can say, let's create a name, a full name that is the result of get. There is no set. You can't set the full name, right? The name. But we're going to take first name and we're going to add a space in between first name and last name. And that'll give us our name property. So we've defined on one line how we're going to return the value. Notice there is no return here. So we would read this when we're reading code as get such that first name concatenate space concatenate last name. And that's what we're going to return. Okay. This needs to be a byte as well. There we go. So there, instead of age being right, I had the curly brace with get and return value up here. Right? Look at a couple extra lines of code, the return value in there. We can be a little bit more concise and turn it into public byte like this. Now, why am I getting cannot implicitly? I didn't. That should work now. So now if I say new student, first name, last name, Sally Smith, and I execute that, there we go. So now, because I added that name property, it's going to output, look at that, there's the name property, and it's concatenated together, first name and last name. It's a simple thing to understand how we formatted that, but that becomes, that concatenation for a property there becomes so valuable when you might have some other business logic that you might be using to take in values from different properties. Calculate some sort of a value and place it right there. Maybe you want to calculate your student's grade point average and make that available as a property. That's not something they're going to set, but it would maybe reach into their various the various lessons that they've participated in, check out their various exams, and do a calculation against those and return a value. This is the very simple example of, I'm just going to return that name. Just like I did for the age here. I did this calculation against a faux birth date, and we output the age right there. So these are nice ways for you to hide that business logic. Put it behind a property so the person coming after you, the next human that needs to interact with your business class, right? It's business class. It's not just a class, but you're dealing with this class that has some algorithm in it, some code that's going to provide value. So we call it business value, right? We're going to hide that so that they don't have to learn that. They can just reference the age or the full name, and it gets formatted for them appropriately the same way every time. You can't get that wrong then when you hide it like that. Hide it when you put it behind a property. So, well, thank you. Is it Yupmo? Thank you so much. Can I compile C# on a Raspberry Pi 4? Asks Johnny B. Cat. Yes. In fact, we were doing that over on my channel. I have my tower here. Can I brag for a minute? Chat, do you mind if I brag for a minute? I'm not even going to wait for you to answer. That's a tower of 6 Raspberry Pis. That runs C#. That runs Kubernetes. That runs ASP.NET. We're building and working with this live on my other channel. I'm going to move that back off screen here. I need this table. So, very much you can do that. Absolutely. We have compilers for the ARM64 processor that you can use to build and work with all of that code. It's great stuff. .NET, C#, it really is wherever you want to write code, okay? We support it. Now, we've talked about properties, things that we want to expose outside of, and they have these get and set interactions. And I'm not going to, there's other ones out there, other ways you can define things with init and other configuration. I'm not going to talk about that right now. It's a little bit further than I want to go. I've got about 20 minutes left here. Let me get into fields, and I'll come back to chat in just a second. So, fields are a way for us to define a variable directly on the class that we are not intercepting the interactions with the get and set accessor. So, we can define private fields, public fields, internal fields. Most folks will not expose fields publicly or internally. They make them private, like this, so that you have a birth date in this example that is private. It's hidden behind the scenes that folks can't get to. it's being used for calculations like our age calculation further along. Let me show you. So if we create a student and pass in their birth date, we'll initialize in the constructor and set that birth date field equal to the value that was passed in. Now, this is a little bit of that dependency injection concept. Our student depends on having a birthday. That kind of makes sense. Everybody has a birthday. So our student depends on having a birthday. That birth date is being assigned into this field so that it can be used elsewhere, like right here in my age property calculation. That makes sense. So now my age property calculation, let me move over here, you can see it uses the birth date. It subtracts the birth date. It doesn't subtract June 1st. So consequently, I can now create a new student and specify, well, when's their birth date? It was October 1st, 2003. And now when we run that, we say, well, display their age. They're 17 years old. Ooh. That means they can drive. That means they can vote next year. They can vote in October. Ooh, okay. That's a thing. So these are ways for us to define fields that we can hide and interact with inside our class to provide business value and not necessarily have them exposed to the outside. Maybe it does make sense to share their birth date. Maybe that is something that that our institution wants to make visible. Okay, fine. I can make that available to the rest of the world by saying I can do it this way. Say get return. Let me change this to, I like to name my fields underscore. My private fields starting with an underscore. So now I can say return underscore birth date. Okay. So now when I run that, let's do a display S. Put some semicolons at the end of these. So now age 17, and there we go. Check it out. Birth date, there's the full birth date, age 17, and they are enrolled. Okay. So it's exposed. I can't change it because it doesn't have a set method. And I can also, right, if I wanted, I could really just do that, right? And that gives me the same output. Cool. Let me come back to chat and catch up with what's been going on over here. Lambda, sure. Why not use string interpolation? Could do that. Sure, absolutely. So the reference to string interpolation, I'm not sure if I covered that last time. Instead of concatenating like this, you can format strings. There's several different ways to format strings. This concatenation syntax is one way. We can also say string.concat, because we're concatenating these together. And we can say first name, space, last name. And I can do it that way. Actually, I can even go so far as, right? I can do it like this. I don't think I even need the get on that, right? Yep. I don't even need the get. So I can format it like that. I can also use string formatting. So string formatting is a way for you to say, well, place something in position 0 here. Let me move that up so it's just above my shoulder. I'm going to put some space, and then I'm going to put position 1, and I can say first name, last name. So this says, here's the template of the string that I want to format, with something in position 0, something in position 1. The positions start with 0 and count upwards. So position 0, position 1, and the next argument gets placed in position 0, the next argument gets placed in position 1. When I execute that, I still get Sally Smith. That's string formatting. That's the old school way to use string formatting, and that's been around since CSharp 1. The newer way to do this, using what's called string interpolation, is the preferred way that C# developers like to write this code now. And what we can do is we can actually put our properties like this. Wait, leave that other sample there, so I can leave that in the code. Right? Comment that one out. Right? Tab U over. So if I want to format this and say, just like you've seen string interpolation probably in JavaScript, there is string interpolation for C#. And a lot of these language developers built this stuff at the same time and influenced each other because, let's face it, at Microsoft, the folks who maintain several different languages all sit in the same room. C#, Visual Basic, F#. F# is overseas in London, but they meet weekly. TypeScript. The same guy who built TypeScript also built Turbo Pascal, Delphi. Herb Sutter, who manages C++. Yes. Guido van Rossum, who invented Python and is managing a bit of the language. Not quite as active as he was originally, but he's still active on that group. Dials in and he's on those language developer meetings. So quite literally, 7, 8 of the most popular programming languages of the world are being talked about by folks who work together. So they influence each other, they help grow, and make programming better for all of us, no matter what language you're using. So we can do string interpolation like this, where we put our C# property names inside curly braces, inside the quotes, where we want them to be formatted. But unlike JavaScript, where you have to put $, before each one of these to indicate, hey, this is a thing to format, C# says, well, just put it outside the quotes. And you see the formatter picked up automatically, and it changed that from the burgundy to the turquoise here to indicate this is a C# property. This is a C# property that it's formatting. And I get the same value. That technique is called string interpolation, okay? All 3 of these methods work. Your choice how you want to use them. Okay, I talked about fields. We're going to get into, let me keep an eye on the time. 20 minutes to go here. Encapsulation. I talked about, yeah, let's talk about encapsulation here. Let me catch up with chat. New toy? Nah, a little bit. Yeah, the Raspberry Pi cluster. Please brag. Tower giveaway? No tower giveaway. Am I going to send these notes? They are all posted. This notebook is posted over here in the CSharpFritz, C# with CSharpFritz GitHub repository. There's a link just below the YouTube video with links out to this repository. Am I going to cover private versus protected? Already did. When should I make a field public instead of using a property? Asks Wet Seal. That's more of an artistic type of question. There's nothing that says you couldn't make a field public. However, folks like to make properties that encapsulate, and we're going to show you encapsulation here in just a second, that wrap that field so that you can change the interaction with that field later. It's almost like future-proofing your API. You can continue working with the age property. How it gets calculated, how it interacts, what the storage looks like behind it, you as the consumer of the age property, you don't care. You don't care that it's doing this math floor here, or like it was earlier, it was just being stored in the class. Or right here, it's being calculated from the birth date. You as the consumer of this student class, working with this, referencing that age property, you don't care. However, if you were referencing an age field that was being stored, well, now instead of last minute calculating it like this, you're going to have to calculate and store that age value every time it changes because folks are referencing that age field, and you can't intercept what's happening on get to do some business logic and return. It's your choice of how you want to maintain. When do you want to do the calculation? This type of calculation, the formatting for the name that we saw, right? Those are simple, trivial calculations. Who cares if it takes an extra processor cycle to put that together? Big deal. There might be bigger calculations that it does make sense to pre-calculate. But by using a property where you can provide this get abstraction over your interaction with the true value behind the scene, it gives you as the developer the flexibility to change that implementation at any time without having it impact the folks who use your classes. Continuing on here, let me catch back up with chat. There's a lot of comments coming in here. Woo. Yes, I purposely was missing the dollar for interpolation. Yes, indeed. They're all lobbying each other to implement similar features in different languages. I wouldn't say they're lobbying each other, but they're having great discussions. That we had a fantastic discussion during the last .NET Conf between Guido van Rossum, inventor of Python, and Don Syme, inventor of F#, where Don was showing Guido some F# features, and Guido said, you know, I like that feature so much. There's my 15-minute warning. I like that feature so much. We're actually implementing something like that in an upcoming version of Python. And interesting discussions then happen about, well, how do we implement? Are there things we need to be concerned about? What did you learn on memory management? Yada, yada, yada. Continue, continue, continue. Really great stuff that means now Python developers are going to get an F#-like feature, and they're going to be more productive. They're going to be able to do cool things that F# folks know how to do and take advantage of that kind of right, that cross-pollination of ideas. It just makes the programming languages better for all of us. It's really great stuff. I agree, and the interpolation is much easier to read there. Martin Den, or is it Martin Eden? I think it's I'm going to let that one go. Am I going to update the notes on GitHub from this stream? Yeah, I always push up the updates. How to escape string interpolation? Add an extra curly brace. If I actually want the text first name there, just add an extra curly brace. So now when it outputs curly brace first name. So if you actually need the curly braces, just put 2 of them. So, okay. And back to Sally Smith. A method to get the field is another option. Yes, that's encapsulation. Talking about that in just a minute. Fun PixArt. Can't wait for P#? No, that's not a thing. Imagine being around those folks on a daily basis. Yeah, a ton we can learn there. So, all right. So let's talk about encapsulation. So we have fields. We can encapsulate those fields by wrapping a property around it that knows how to get and set that field property. This was the original way that we would build properties with C# and has since evolved to those auto-implemented properties that you see now, which are the preferred way that we interact with them. So now we can define our birth date here. Let's make that underscore birth date. There we go. And we can also receive and place our first name and last name at construction time into these other values. So let's say this dot underscore first name equals... Oh, you're not going to autocomplete fast enough for me here. That's fine. This dot underscore last name equals last name. And it sets those values in the constructor for me. And they're encapsulated, right? We're wrapping them. So just like the question a little bit earlier, why wouldn't I just make a field public? I can change the interaction. This is trivial for me to write, but I can change the interaction if I need to by adding some extra code in here. For example, I want to know when the last name for somebody changes, right? Maybe it's one of the students got married, right? Maybe they got adopted, and there was a last name change, right? These things happen. Folks go to the courtyard, change their name all the time. So I want to send some notification, right? Maybe there's another system out there that we need to update. For the purposes of this, I'm just going to display, hey, the name changed. Here's a notification of that when the last name is set. I'm able to inject this extra bit of processing because I used a property, and I'm encapsulating, I'm wrapping how we're interacting with the field. So now I'm going to create a new student named Jeff Stevens, born on October 1st, 2003. And I'm going to change Jeff's last name to Fritz. And finally, display our student. And notice I get name change notification. It executed this first line. Nothing was output. It set the name and output the name change notification. And now I get, there's Jeff Fritz, age 17. Okay. That should make sense. That should help answer the question about why should I use, why not use a public field versus a public property. I think that makes it a little bit clearer, some of the things you can do with that. Catching up with chat here. Hey Adonis, everything's on YouTube. You'll be able to rewind and go back. Am I going to cover more complex topics in the future, such as sockets? Not sockets. Sockets is a framework thing. Project architecture? Yes. Dependency injection? Yes. Yes, you can use construction parameters. You can set defaults on those. Haven't talked about that yet. We'll talk about that when we get to methods. I believe that's next week or the week after. Display is not part of C#. That's a feature of the .NET notebook. So, all right. Moving on. Constants. So now we have fields. Those are places in memory inside of our class that we can change and interact with. A constant is something that you define at compile time, at the time that you write code, and it never changes for the life of your application. You use the const keyword to declare it, and we can then either reference that constant outside the class or reference it inside of it depending on the scope that you set for it. So I've defined, here's my student class, and I've got a constant here that says, hey, the maximum number of years that somebody can be enrolled as a student is 5. And I can interact with that down here. So I can display and output stuff here if I wanted. I can interact with it from outside, like this, student.maximum years, because the constant doesn't live on the student instance. The constant lives on the type. So we reference it as student dot in order to get that value. So I'll execute that, and it shows the maximum years enrolled, 5, and I displayed accessing it this way to get maximum years enrolled. I have to, through the type, reference it. I can't access it here. It is doing it through the instance, and no, can't do it. All right, you must go through the type name. Similarly, it's a constant. You can't change it. The left-hand side of assignment must be a variable property or indexer. You can't change it to change the value of a constant. So that doesn't work either. Now, we've declared and worked with properties, fields, constants inside of our classes. We're going to wrap up here by showing you now the shortcut that you can use to create reference types that have those auto-implemented properties. You can create them with one line now, and we call it a record. Now, a record, I call this a student record here. A record has been available since C# 9. That means it's available in .NET 5 and later. So if you have .NET Framework, if you have .NET Core, it does not work in those versions of the runtime. It only works in the newer versions. There's some workarounds folks have figured out to make this work. Fully supported way to interact with this is .NET 5 and forward. But instead of defining my student record with all of those properties laid out, I can define it like this, with one line of code. And this is creating what are called positional properties, right? Positional, yeah. There we go. Positional syntax for the collection of properties. There we go. So public, and I use the new keyword record, and I call this a student record, and I define the names of the properties that I want to create here, comma delimited with their types, semicolon. So now I can say, well, S is a new student record, first name, Sally, last name, Smith, and there's Sally's age. I can display S, and we'll see our student record output, but I can also display S to string. Now look at that. Our display of our Sally Smith record gets that same nice formatting here. The notebook is formatting it because I use the display command, and it's formatting this because it's an object, and it's taking that object and playing out all of the properties. It's displaying them as a nice grid for us. There's now in records an override for toString that's generated for you at compile time that creates a format with the properties defined in the same order that you defined them here, so that the toString for a record type makes sense, is readable, is something that you know it's only a record. It's a small object that you can work with right here, okay? So we can start to work with records like this. Now, there's a couple other gotchas about records that you should know. Records are, by default, immutable. So if I say s.lastname equals Fritz, it can only be assigned in that initializer. Now, and see it errors out. There are more that you can do with records in order to fix that, to work around that. But by default, if you use just this one-line syntax here, it's immutable. You can't change it. It's defined, it's sitting there, and when you're no longer referencing your student record here, it gets cleaned up by the garbage collector. There's some other things that you'll want to know about records, but for creating them like this, it works just fine. There's a with keyword you can use, and there's a link to the documentation here if you want to go learn more about how records work. There's a with keyword you can use so you can create that new record with the changed last name if you want it. But I'll leave that to you to go and research on your own time. We're just about out of time. I got about 4 minutes left here. Let me head back over to the main set, and let's catch up with chat and talk about all the cool things happening with .NET. Get up to speed here. It'd be nice if I went back to the other scene. Wouldn't it be nice? Hey, there I am. Hello. Ooh, good thing I didn't. I just moved my camera by accident. Oh no. Oh no. We don't want that. How we doing there? Let me see. Did you miss a lot? You missed the whole thing. I'm sorry. Really, we just went through the whole thing. That's okay. Video is over on YouTube. It's on Twitch. You can rewind if you'd like. Can I set a value on those records in the moment it is created? Yes. That's what I was doing. Am I going to cover DDD implementation? No. Domain-driven design is a much bigger architecture topic that's not for beginners that I will not be covering that here. Is there a video on setting up the .NET notebook? There's links and description there on the repository telling you how you can clone it. You can open it in Visual Studio Code just fine, or you can click the open in binder link right at the top of the repository, and that'll get you in there. So cool. All right. Thank you very much for the kind words here. We're wrapping things up, and let's play that funky music to call it a day here. There it is. Thank you so much, friends. I really appreciate you tuning in. I will share the link to the repository one more time in chat. It's been quite a day. We've got a lot done, and I'm happy with it. There we go. So, we've covered more about C#. We've learned more about classes. We learned about building our own types. We learned a little bit about records, defining properties, fields, some encapsulation, working with constants. So much more to learn, and that's why this is like a 2-month series that we cover here on the channel. We'll be going through and doing more about this. If you want to go further in depth, join me tomorrow over on my channel, twitch.tv/CSharpFritz. We'll be talking about Laser. We're going to be working with Playwright and building some integration tests that we're going to be deploying to that Raspberry Pi cluster. So I hope you tune in over there. Tuesday, Thursday, Sundays when I usually broadcast over there. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're over on Learn TV, all the best. Hope you're having a great rest of your day. If you're on YouTube, there's a ton of great videos here. Go ahead back in the C# with CSharpFritz series, and you can see all the great content that we've recorded and talked about here for .net. And if you're over on Twitch, I think it's time for a raid. We're going to set up a raid. We're going to find somebody else on the big twitch.tv network that we can connect you with. Going to see who else is streaming. And looking. Could be. It might be. Our friends at Code It Live are just about to go live. They're having... Looks like they're going to be talking about website traffic. That sounds interesting. Let's set up that raid for Code It Live. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. I hope you check out the recordings if you need them. You've seen the link to the GitHub repository. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you tomorrow on my channel. Take care.